Greetings from Feldtman Lake. This is such a beautiful place. I want to show it to you, but it has been a while actually. A few days have passed since my last recording, since I last been on camera. When I left Huggin Cove Wednesday morning, I walked on up to that favorite little place where I had found this little bench of a rock where the waves are crashing up on. I got some great images there the previous day. Well, I figured, I'm going to go ahead and get some more on my way out. And the wind was really coming in and had some major splashing going on. So there was no way I was getting down in there. And it would just have been a complete shower had I done that. So I stayed up on the bluff, which is about 15 to 20 feet above the water level, the main water level. And then that rock bench is at least 15 feet out. And so I figured, I'm pretty much safe. So I set up the camera. I'm taking a shot down to the south. I got some trees, got the hard rocks, got the waves crashing against it. Beautiful scene, beautiful, beautiful. And then this wave comes up and it kind of sort of just gives us a little bit of a mist. And I was like, that's not good. So I whip out my towel, I dry off the camera. And then the big one hits just a few seconds later, probably 20 seconds later. Comes up, I heard it, and this one was from behind me. And the water was coming from way up there. So, I'm about 20 feet, 15 to 20 feet above the water level. It's coming from at least 5 to 10 feet above me. That was a major wave. And it just drenched the whole right side of me, drenched the camera. I stuck my hand out to try and protect the camera a little bit. I may have saved it a little bit from enough force to just knock the camera over, but I took it to the side, way out of the way of all the water, dried it off. And in that time frame, another one happened. I was like, I'm done. I can't do any more here. I wasn't too sure that what I got was a quality shot, but I just said, hey, I can't risk this camera dying. It's the only one I have with me in this part of the trip. So I walked on up the trail a little bit, found something I want to take a picture of, because I wanted to take pictures along the trail going on up, just to show you guys what the trail is like. And then the camera gives me an error. And certainly it was a rough trail, very interesting pieces, whether it's the rocks and things like that, interesting pieces to photograph, not for the sake of the art, but just for the sake of communicating what this trail is all like. And then it gave me this error saying, turn the power off and then turn it back on. So I turned the button off and it didn't go away. I had to take the battery out. I did that 2 or 3 times. And it would always work, it would always work for about 15 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds, then it would give me this error. I was getting a little frustrated. And in times like that, I was just like, you know what? I'm here for the experience too. I can't be just ruining the whole rest of the time if this doesn't work out, if the camera doesn't work, because that would just, kind of ruin the whole point of being here, right? To take pictures. Well, my point of being here is also for the experience too, and I figured I'll just finish it on my cell phone. I said a quick prayer and I was just like, if you want it to work, Lord, it's going to work tomorrow. I'll give it a day, and I trust it'll work tomorrow, and if not, I'm still going to have a good attitude about it, because again, it's just about putting myself in the right frame of mind and wanting to just be receptive to what's going on. So I left the battery compartment open and took the battery out and just hiked the rest of the way with it slung over my shoulder. And I photographed a bunch on my cell phone. And so I walked up and around the north part, and it's a mile longer to go that part of the loop than it was the southern part of the loop. And I got into Washington Creek Campground near Wendigo and found a shelter that I could set up in so I don't have to set up my tent. And then I just set the camera there to dry out. And the next morning, when I powered it up, it actually worked. I took a couple of pictures, and here's the shelter that I was staying in. And the smile on my face. I was just so pleased. I was so happy. But about 30 seconds or so into it, initially I was like, yay, it's working. I got on trail after breakfast and all that. I got on trail, and on my second shot or so, it gave me the error. And I was like, oh man. But it took about 30 seconds to 45 seconds this time to give me that error. I was like, well, that is an improvement. And this is a walk. It's coming out down the trail here to Feldtman Lake. It's about 8 miles. It's actually 8.5. But one of the rangers told me, oh, it's 8 miles. And so I then decided, I'm going to pause every mile and just kind of take the pack off, give myself a break. And on mile 4, I had lunch. And between mile 2 and 4, I kind of devised a plan. I was going to set my tripod up. I was going to put this shirt around the tripod legs and have the neck hole right around the camera, and then it would bring the heat up from the stove that was going to be underneath, lit underneath. It would bring the heat up right by the camera, and I'd get this nice warm air flowing over it, dry, warm air. Well, I initially set it up, the tripod was too high, so I had to lower the tripod. I certainly didn't want to melt anything, so I lowered the tripod, put my jet boil down there with just the burner going, and while I was eating my lunch, it took about 15 minutes or so, and ever since then I've not had a problem. I was so happy. I've been able to do video like this. I've been able to get all my shots. So this morning here at Feldtman Lake, it was beautifully foggy. Didn't know what to expect. I just woke up. Well, another hiker had told me. She said, hey, make sure you get campsite 1 if you can, and just up the way, you're going to be able to see a moose. He just comes out all the time. So I walked up there last night, and I saw his footpath, his foot tracks. And so I woke up before sunrise like I would have anyway, waiting for that moose, but it was so beautifully foggy and I got some great images, and so I'm just kind of rolling through some of these images to give you a teaser of what it was like. And then the sun started poking through the fog layer, and so I put the 70 to 350 on, and I got some great images of that sun disk composed with the trees and the tops of the trees. I thought that was really cool. And last night I had a wolf sniff my tent. He walked around twice, and boy howdy, he was looking for something, and that was rather exciting. I would rather see the wolf. I would rather photograph the wolf. So I am hopeful that sometime today, or possibly tomorrow morning, I'll be able to see the wolf. But I have a feeling probably won't be until nighttime. But there was a hiker who said she was just on the path. The wolf came up, walked around her, and continued on. She was making all sorts of racket. Didn't care. So I'm hopeful that I can get something of that wolf, and that will just be awesome to see. All right, so I'm at Feldtman Lake for one more night, and then I'm going to be heading back to Washington Creek tomorrow. That's Saturday. And then I will be taking the boat back on Sunday to Grand Portage, from Wendigo to Grand Portage. Today, Friday, I'm heading down to Rainbow Cove, and I'll take lunch and supper with me. I don't know how long I'll be down there, but I'll head down there to see what that's like. Maybe it'll be a long trip, maybe it'll be quick. And I don't know. We'll just see what I have defined. So right now I'm going to go ahead and cut to the studio, and we'll take a look at some of these images that I shot this morning, and then we'll just continue on our journey. Hey there, just picking it up in a studio, and just wanted to start off with a little bit of, I guess, maybe continuing the story. Looking here at the map so we can get a really good sense maybe of where Isle Royale is. As I zoom out, here's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and this is the North Shore of Minnesota, and of course we go into Canada right here. So you can see it is a bit closer, a little bit to Canada. And I was even able to catch, when I was up here at Huggin Cove, wherever that is, I was able to actually catch a cell signal from Canada. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, I left the last segment of the video down here at Feldtman Lake at the very southern portion, and then there's this little stream that goes down to this Rainbow Cove area, and that's where I left things. So did a little bit of shooting here in Rainbow Cove, did a bit more shooting here at Feldtman Lake, and then of course took this trail all the way back to Wendigo, and really the Washington Creek campground is where you stay for the night, and then was able to catch the ferry on the way back to Minnesota, Grand Portage, Minnesota. But while I was there at Washington Creek, I saw this moose. It was so incredible. I just loved being able to photograph this moose. I was just having a little bit of a supper, and the gal in the camp next to me just kind of came over a little bit excited. She was like, "Hey, there's a moose in the river. There's a moose in the water." And so I followed it a little bit, got a few shots, got this little bit of video that you saw there just a few seconds ago. And then I was like, well, she's not doing much. And then, well, she then went across on the other side of the river and went off doing her thing. So I went back to eating my supper. And then she came back and the light was even better. And I was just like, oh, yes. And so I was able to follow this moose down the creek. And it was just wonderful to see this creature just really calm, just, hardly knew that I was there, or at least didn't pay much attention to me. She was definitely used to humans being there in this area and just having a really awesome time tracking this animal. Well, after about 5 or 6 campsites going down the way, and I'm, interrupting myself, or not interrupting myself, but I'm interrupting the people if they were there at camp. And they were all like, yeah, come on in. This is awesome. This is awesome. She ended up turning and coming straight towards me. And as I'm photographing, those images didn't really turn out all that well. So unfortunately, by this time, I've deleted those images. But anyway, she then turned and went up on the other way to get up out of the river, because this embankment was at least, I'm going to say, 15 feet high above this. So the campsites are about 15 feet above the river. And then she just kind of came up and just walked really slowly, and I was like, oh, this is just, I was excited. And so then I was able to just track her and follow her. Well, I wanted to really keep my distance now, because this is something where she could bolt, which she ended up doing, and, could make mincemeat out of me in just a few seconds. But she did end up running right by me. I would guess she was in the neighborhood of 6 feet away. I kind of felt like if I just reached out, I could grab her, but that really isn't accurate. It may have felt that way, but this I'm going to guess 1,000 pounds. I don't know how big they grow, how heavy they get. Her shoulder was easily over my head, and I'm 6'1", and so her shoulder was easily about my head height or slightly more than my head height, and she was just full on galloping right beside me. So that was a bit of excitement for that time frame. That was just really amazing. But I wanted to look at a few of these pictures that we didn't get to in the portion of the previous portion of the video. And that is to just look at a few of these pictures that came from Feldtman Lake and talk briefly about them and the experience that was there at Feldtman Lake. Very calm, very serene, and with that fog that was coming in each morning, it really just set a tone for the overall, just the idea that things were really calm and peaceful, except for the wildlife, where I mentioned the wolf that, kind of sniffed me and whatnot. But just this whole notion of, I don't know if I want to say desertion or desolate, but just wild and open and untamed. And it is very much, this is the kind of thing that I really appreciate about the great outdoors and photographing in the great outdoors, because it can become what you want to make of it. It can become, when you attach yourself, when you put yourself in this situation, in this position, you're opening yourself up to this environment, to this creation, to this stuff. And to me, it's a bit of a spiritual experience. I'm always appreciative of the fact that I'm able to experience the majesty that is creation, and being able to witness and experience that and record that and create my own message or create my own commentary through my photography on these things. An image like this, it, in one sense, it feels really boring and desolate and whatever, but in another sense, this is how I was feeling at the time and the thoughts that I was having at the time. So not just my feelings, but also just literally my thoughts. Open, bright and brilliant, yet also just what is that? It's surreal and almost like the beginning of time, as it were. This is the very elemental beginning of time, is what it kind of sort of feels like. But then just focusing on design elements and creating this layered element with the clouds, with the sun, with the silhouetted trees. They all come together to create an interesting composition that hopefully, of course, is telling an effective story. Converting to black and white to really hone in on just the simplicity of the subjects that we're looking at. The notion of the textures and the idea of the water flowing in, but I've got a several second, what is that, 1.6 or is that 16 seconds? Where am I at? 1.6 seconds there. And how that texture just really is magnified. And in this case, the color was doing no good, so I just converted it to black and white because I wanted to really have the power come through and force the brain. When we do that, we're forcing the brain to really pay attention in different ways. Color is one of the first things we see and understand and are affected by when we look at a picture. But when you remove that opportunity, you don't have color to help you interpret an image, then you have to rely on these other things. And that causes the brain to hit the brake a little bit. And then we have to absorb what these other things mean. And without color, it's just a different experience, a different opportunity to understand what these things mean. This is that Rainbow Cove area down along the lake, the big lake, Lake Superior, on the southern edge of the island. And just wandering along and just seeing what's available. This is the other thing, one other thing I like about photographing in the great outdoors, and that is just simply exploring and discovering. To explore and discover something, to trip across something and be like, okay, what am I going to say about this object? Or am I going to move along and not photograph this object? This particular piece of driftwood, I moved along initially. There just wasn't something that was moving me about this piece. It was when I came back towards the trail that I further contemplated. I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and make an image here. I think I can make something work here. Back here at Feldtman Lake, the last evening I was there, the clouds really rolled in and were looking very interesting. And then I was one of the only ones there, a nice, wonderful storm once again. Boy, did it moved in, and it was a significant storm. That was pretty intense. It did not get the lightning because I got out there a little bit too late. The thunderhead itself moved through quite quickly. And so by the time I was like, okay, I better get an image of this, it was gone. I thought it was interesting because it was gone so quickly. But what a great experience. It was just absolutely magnificent. So, like I had mentioned, after Feldtman Lake, I then woke up the next day, hiked all the way back, that 8.5 miles, all the way back to Washington Creek, stayed the night there. That's when I photographed the moose. And then I was on the boat the next day. It was roughly in the neighborhood of noon. I forget exactly when, but it's about noon, 1 o'clock, that I was able to catch the boat back to Grand Portage and then continue my journey from there. Well, thank you so much for joining me here being at and talking about Isle Royale National Park. It's such an amazing place to go and photograph and camp and backpack. Just a wonderful place. Be sure to leave a comment, maybe ask a question, whatever it is you'd like to do. I'd love to hear from you. So, especially if you've been to Isle Royale, you can maybe relate a little bit and tell us what things have been about. And then, of course, as we're looking for the future, make sure you subscribe. I'm going to be continuing with more videos, coming out with some teaching items as it relates to design and creativity in photography. It's a course that I'm going to be releasing here soon for your ideas on what it means to you to be creative with your photography. I take a little bit of a different approach on it where I'm really honing in and helping you hone in on understanding what's important to you about your photography, and then teaching you design principles from a graphic design standpoint that we can then apply to your photography. So stay tuned for that, as that is coming out too. And I'm just excited to be able to release that as a standalone course. All right, we'll catch you in the next video. Until then, God bless and happy shooting.